Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another session of Inspiro 2020.
Well, beginning with the session, I would like to say that IEEE is and remains strongly committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and we see no place for hatred and discrimination in our communities. This is what our leaders at IEEE have got to say.
Truly, IEEE stands out among all other technical organizations, and you can imagine the efforts put in by the governing body to make IEEE reach unprecedented heights.
Yes, the board of directors, presidents, and president-elects at IEEE make solid grounds to keep our globally diverse community updated in an ever-changing world.
And so is our next aviator scheduled to take off for Inspiro 2020, Miss Susan Cathy Land. She is IEEE 2020 President-elect, serving 3 terms on the IEEE Board of Directors, and also has been the President of IEEE Computer Society.
She has more than 30 successful years of industry experience in the application of software engineering methodologies.
So keep your eyes peeled as Miss Land will help us land on IEEE Treasure Island to embark upon her adventurous journey with IEEE.
Over to you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, see if you can see it. Can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me know if you can see my slides.
Yes, ma'am, we can see it. Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so I wanted to begin by thanking everyone for the invitation to speak today, and give a special thanks to the A.D. Patel Institute of Technology and IEEE ADIT Student Branch for the invitation to speak. It's just a great opportunity, and I was asked to share my personal journey with IEEE. This is something I've never done before. I gave it a lot of thought, so I hope you enjoy what I have to say today. So, as the world's largest technical professional society, IEEE's core purpose is to foster technological innovation and excellence for the benefit of humanity. Our members are vibrant, diverse engineering and technological professionals who are committed to elevating their professional image, expanding their global network, connecting with peers locally, and giving back to their communities. IEEE is unique in that our members create so much of the value in IEEE. Our engaged and inspired members make IEEE a unique and respected voice. IEEE as an institute is centered on our members who create the value for IEEE. They guide our organization's direction and allow IEEE to have a strong impact on the world. So it was my experience as a member that has encouraged me to devote my time and energy to IEEE. I know that every volunteer that I meet values being a part of our technical professional community. I know I do. The strength of IEEE is built from the bottom up. Those who attend our local meetings, share their knowledge and experience, and help with the heavy lifting of coordinating and communicating IEEE activities are the ones who make IEEE strong. And I thank every single one of them for their time and energy. So during my years of service with IEEE, I've had the great pleasure of interacting with and supporting our students and young professionals. I believe that students and young professionals are the key drivers of tomorrow's innovations, and they're integral to advancing technology for humanity. You are also an integral part of IEEE's core strength. Your enthusiasm and sense of camaraderie helps bolster our efforts to build strong partnerships and cooperation worldwide. By staying a member of IEEE after graduation and throughout your career, you can find resources along the way to build your skills, raise your visibility, and create a professional network that make friendships that last a lifetime. I know I have. I have friends I've met 30 years ago in IEEE that are still friends of mine today. I was asked to come and speak to you today about my personal journey with IEEE and the difference it's made to me personally, and how you might get involved in IEEE to further your personal career and enhance your IEEE journey. So here's an overview of what I'm going to discuss today. So where are you on your path? I'll talk about my career path. Where was I when I met IEEE? The difference IEEE made in my life. Talk about your personal goals, how IEEE influenced mine. Where do you want to go? And where did I want to go with my career and where I ended up? And the IEEE mission and vision and how it can help you. And I want you to think about, as I'm discussing this, that, we're all the sum of our experiences, our influencers, and the choices we make along the way. And that ultimately, this is what makes us who we are. So this is what, this slide shows us what most people think of when they start out and envision a career path. I know this is what I thought my career might look like when I started out, when I graduated from college initially. You graduate from college, you get a job, you get promoted, and then you get your dream job, and then you retire. But this is what my career path looked like. So, I got a job, I changed jobs, I went back and finished college, I worked part-time for a period of time, I went back to school again. So anyway, it was kind of a mess. It was not what I really thought it would look like. So when I was asked to talk about my IEEE path, again, this is not something I've done, and it's really not, I don't know, some people are pretty comfortable about talking about themselves, and I'm not. I feel that, especially about my IEEE work, I feel that volunteer work, especially the work I've done with IEEE, is a privilege. I feel very fortunate to have the role that I have in IEEE. Each volunteer job I've had is a privilege. It's a service. But I do feel that it's important for students and young professionals to understand this, that volunteer service should be just that you should go into that to support for IEEE with the understanding that you should be there to support the mission and vision of IEEE. You should understand that you'll benefit from this arrangement with personal growth and relationships that will last. And the knowledge and networking that you gain will benefit you throughout your career. Volunteer service is a way to give back to the profession that you love, a way to contribute to the grand challenges, a way to network with other like minds. And I'm sharing my path through IEEE, where I got to today to become the incoming president, which is kind of mind-boggling when I sit back and think about it. And so you'll see where I began my journey. All right, so this is what I typically show when I'm asked to speak or when it's relevant to groups, and it can be misleading. It doesn't really show the real path. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cough. It took many hours of volunteer work, various committees, and it doesn't really show where I started. The work I did in standards. I started in the Standards Association. And so this is what I'll talk about. All right, so when did I become involved in IEEE? So my husband and I grew up in Georgia in the United States, and we graduated from college. I graduated from the University of Georgia, and we moved to California. And I worked at a place called Pacific Missile Test Center. And we lived and worked in California for about 8 years. And then we moved to Florida to work at a place called Eglin Air Force Base. And I worked at the 46th Test Wing. And it was during this period of time that I found IEEE. I was managing software development projects. I was a lower level manager leading teams, teams of developers. So my background, I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a software engineer. And at the time, there was no such thing as software engineering. So software engineering was not even hardly being taught in school. And teams of developers, it was kind of the wild, wild west. And when I started in software development, individual programmers were new. I was one of the first. And the Mac and the PC, those were kind of the new computers that were being rolled out. So it was really a burgeoning field, new, and engineering as a discipline was really unknown to software. So it was very difficult, right? So when we had to do a large integrated project, everybody was kind of on their own. Things like configuration management, requirements development, those were not known in the area of software. It's kind of every individual for themselves. So I was leading teams and trying to get to done on a large integrated software development effort was very difficult. So I was looking for guidance, and I turned to IEEE. I found these software engineering standards that were being developed. IEEE was leading in this area. And they had these accompanying guides. And so I used the guides to train my programmers and my software teams in best practices for software engineering. And I found out that the guides were going to be discontinued. And I was not happy because the standards were not very informative. They were written as standards are, they were very high level, but the guides were very instructive. So I found out that there was this thing called an IEEE fellow, and I talked to this fellow at my company and I said, well, what do I do? They're going to discontinue these guides and this is the wrong direction. People that are working in the field like me and my teams need this information. And he suggested that I get involved. So this is the structure of IEEE Standards Association. And had I known that this was the structure at the time, and this is what it looks like now, it was a little different at the time. Before my involvement in IEEE, I probably would not have been so bold. But I wanted to give those IEEE standards developers a piece of my mind. I wanted to tell them they were going the wrong way. I wanted to let them know that the guidance that they were providing was valuable and they shouldn't discontinue them, that they were very valuable to the practitioners. So, but my initial involvement, if you look at this chart, was at the very bottom. So they had this thing called the International Software Engineering Standards Symposium. And so the fellow that I knew, he said, he recommended that I develop a presentation and present at this International Standards Conference. And so I was, IEEE, number one, I thought IEEE was for electrical engineers. I wasn't an electrical engineer. And they were like this ivory tower. I thought, well, how dare I, presume to present something to IEEE, number one. And number two, I'm not even in their field of interest. And he said, look, here's the IEEE field of interest. It's not only for electrical engineers, it's for people in computing, it's for people in math, it's for people in law, it's for people, he showed me the whole field of interest and people in education. So I said, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm not so far off. And so I developed a presentation and I went to the conference, and little did I know that all the people that were at this conference were the big shots in software engineering. And they were the ones that were the standards developers. And so I presented, and they asked me, not only did they not throw me out of the room, they asked me to get involved, and they asked me to do a follow-on and do what was one of the first IEEE standards surveys, web-based standards surveys. I did 2 years worth of surveys for the standards users to get feedback on how the users were using the software engineering standards. So after that, then they asked me to be part of their conference, and I was the publicity chair. Now, the equivalent at the time, I was what would be called today a young professional. And so you can probably relate to this. They always ask the young professional to be like the web person, or that was the equivalent at the time. The publicity chair was the person who would, for the conference, would but we didn't have, nothing was really web-based at the time. So I was doing all the mailing, contacting companies, trying to get sponsors, that kind of thing. So, and then after that, they asked me to be on their executive committee for the software engineering standards, and I was the secretary. So a lot of the women can relate to this because they always ask you to be the secretary, but that's fine. So I was the secretary. And then they asked me to be on the, then what happened? I was vitality chair, and then I became the vice president for standards. So vice president for standards for Computer Society. Now, I have a story to tell here about how that all happened. So when I got asked to be on the standards committee, I was in my 30s, and the average age of the people, I think I was the only woman, and the average age of the people on the standards committee were in their 60s and 70s. And when I sat on the first committee meeting, the language they used was, they all talked in numbers. They would say 1490, 850, and that's how they referred to all the standards. And then they have this whole process for standards approval. It's a PAR process, and there are different phases for the PAR process. And none of this is ever explained to anybody that's new. Right now, today it is, but then it wasn't. So everybody had this whole inside language, this inside process approval that I had no knowledge of. Well, instead of complaining, or instead of getting mad, or instead of, taking my toys and going home, what I did was I created this huge matrix of all the standards, and I read all the standards. And then I sort of deciphered, because none of this was anywhere, none of the process was laid out, what the standards approval process was and what the PAR process was. And so I laid it all out on this big matrix, and I said, well, this standard 850 is this, and here's my take on it. And I wrote it all in this matrix. These are the good parts of it. These are the bad parts of it. Here's the working group chair's name. Here's his contact information. And here's where it is. And it needs to be renewed in this year. And so I put all this stuff in this giant matrix. And then at the next meeting, when they were talking about the standards, and they would bring up, 1490, I knew what it was. And when somebody would say something about it, if they were right, that's fine. But if they were wrong, I would say, oh, I think it's the PAR is due for renewal on this date. And maybe, I think we need to, I think you might, I'd correct them. So all of a sudden they thought I was the standards savant, right? They thought I was just this genius, right? So that's sort of how I went from being the secretary to the vice president of standards. Now, when I became the VP of standards and I rolled off the board, I let everybody know that I had this matrix, and that that they're still using that matrix today to manage the standards. And when if you are active in Computer Society standards, you'll see that matrix. They use it, they send it out. But that was my secret. So my advice there is that if you're ever, never say no. Take any position that you get, and try to use any means that you can, to figure out where you are, and then leverage your position, move forward, right? Try to make improvements and move forward. One of the things that I did when we were, and think outside the box, when I was VP of standards, they had never gone out and tried to look outside of the Computer Society for new standards to bring in. And there are always things you can do, right? So if you look at my bio, I did get the standards medallion from the Standards Association, and it was because we went out and got 2 complete standards bodies and brought them into the Computer Society, bodies of work, and they're still doing that type of activities today, because there are always works, things like that. They're looking for a home. So we did put those into the IEEE Explore and Standards body of work. So those were 2 things I was pretty proud of. All right, I think that's all I had to say on that. Okay. All right, so I think I talked about this. These on the right, you'll see these are the bodies of standards work that are managed by the Computer Society. And these are just some acronyms, but you can see there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 big libraries of standards that are managed. Oh. All right, so this is the after my work in Computer Society, after being president, and I was also vice president for conferences. Oh, let me go back. I have a story to tell about that. This presentation is mainly going to be about stories and maybe lessons learned. But if you see on the right, I was vice president of conferences for Computer Society. One of the things I try to do, and that you should try to interest and make a difference, make an improvement. So I was asked to be VP of conferences after my work in standards. And so I was VP of conferences for the Computer Society. And at the time they were running about between 200 and 300 conferences. And so I went in, and at the time, nothing was automated. Now they have a tool called ICX, which we're also working to improve and make more integrated and automated with IEEE financials. But at the time, everything was run on forms. So every conference was on forms and nothing was automated. So I went in and did an audit and got all of the forms for all the conferences for 3 years, and realized that the Computer Society was losing about $1 million a year in conferences. So I did an audit. I looked at all the financials for all the conferences, did some baseline metrics, and the way the conferences were being run at the time, there were, I'll just say, like, for example, for a conference that was $100,000, they had a technical budget and a social budget. And this was for every conference had a technical budget and a social budget. And so when I was doing the audit, I would see some conferences would have a technical budget of like $30,000 and their social budget would be $70,000. Now, for an organization like IEEE, who's got a very strong technical mission, that's not appropriate. So I set technical, metric thresholds and started flagging some of these conferences, and realized that we weren't incentivizing, that having a technical and a social budget was not incentivizing the right type of behavior. And we also were running things like it was a surplus model, which they had basically, we were trying to incentivize them to generate a surplus, which doesn't make any sense. So I changed, with the help of all the conference organizers, and the Computer Society Board of Governors, we changed the conference business model to be an admin model and have one budget, just a technical budget, and that they could use for any purpose. And then an admin fee, 15% admin fee. And then if they generated a surplus, they could keep that in their budget for the next year to help seed their next conference, to generate the right types of behavior. Now, the point of this story is that I thought in doing that, I didn't make everybody happy in doing that. A lot of the conference organizers, the bad behaviors, were not happy, right? I took away their party. And they could still have a social budget, but a lot of these people were just having parties every year. And but we got the finances back under control for the Computer Society, which was the right thing to do. But I thought when I started this that I would never have a role in IEEE again or the Computer Society, right? I never in my wildest dreams did I think I would go on and be elected president of the Computer Society. So my moral of the story is that you do the right thing for the right reasons and it'll all work out. But if you're in this game, volunteer support, doing the right things, you can't think about your CV while you're doing this. You have to do things for the right reasons. All right, so then after this is the IEEE structure. And you'll see that the members should always be, I put this member should be at the top. And we should always have the members in the forefront of our minds. And then there's this thing called the Assembly and the Board of Directors. And then there's some structures underneath, right? Well, I was elected to the Board of Directors, as you heard before. I did serve 3 times, one as Vice President of Technical Activities, but I was a division director twice. And I was elected as a division director as a representative from the IEEE Computer Society. and you'll see that there are different boards. MGA and technical activities are two. There's educational activities. You see the Standards Association, and then pubs and IEEE USA. Those are the boards that have a great deal of influence on the board. All right, and then I was elected as technical activities vice president. TAB is one of the big OUs, operating units within IEEE, and is responsible for basically all the election oversight for the councils and societies, and has all the conferences and publications, and is the largest business unit, generates most of the money for IEEE. It has a lot of moving parts. This was my most challenging role to date. I'll let you know after I'm president and tell you what happens after that. But it was an extremely busy and challenging year. But I'll tell you something here. So what's important about this role is I made sure that I understand. I was asked to run for TAB VP every year for 3 years before I actually ran for TAB vice president. But I wanted to make sure that I understood this role. And there are major committees like Finance, Society Council and Review Committee, where you learn about the societies and councils, TAB Management Committee, and there are other committees that you need to be on to really understand technical activities before you run for this office. And that goes for any other volunteer role. If you are interested in running for a volunteer role, you really need to understand that volunteer role if you want to make a difference. You need to understand why, ask yourself, why I'm for this role? Why do I want to be on this committee? Do I understand? Look at the criteria for being on that committee. Are there any prerequisites? Are there committees that are under this committee? Should I be on those committees first, right? Because you need to be prepared for that role if you want to make a difference. And that should really be why you're doing it. You should want to make a difference. You should want to have an impact. You should not just be a butt in a seat, or what I call people lunch eaters. Don't just go there to eat lunch, right? Go there to make a difference. So what were my personal goals starting out? I think initially I just wanted to make it through that first conference, right? I didn't want to get booed off the stage. I was terrified. IEEE standards is probably one of the toughest areas to break into. It required a lot of study and expertise. Those people that I was speaking to really were the experts in their areas, and they were the leaders in the field. And I was very fortunate that those people welcomed me, listened to my ideas, and accepted me readily, and then mentored me. And that's really what's important. It's important that we all remember that when we meet new people that come into IEEE, that there is room for everyone here. I really appreciate the fact that when you opened up this conference, that you emphasized diversity and inclusion. It's important that we remember that when people come to IEEE, that IEEE has a very long history and an important reputation, but it can be a scary place for new people. They can feel intimidated by IEEE, and we need to make it as welcoming and as inclusive as possible for new people. So I knew I wanted to learn this new area of engineering as applied to software. I knew I wanted help with certification in software engineering. And I knew that I wanted to maintain my company's support. When I started in standards, there's no support from IEEE in any form for people that work in standards. Your company has to support your standards work. So at the bottom, you'll see, and I still do this today, even though IEEE supports my work, my volunteer travel and that kind of thing, my company pays for my time. I don't take time off of work, which is very fortunate. So I have to do what I call benefits presentations. Why should my company support my time with IEEE? So I've done these for years, and you'll see one that says level of effort projections. That's when my company was supporting my time and travel, so they had to pay for my travel. So it's important that you start thinking of these types of things. And I actually have quit 2 companies in the past when maybe leadership changed, and they were supporting my IEEE work and then stopped. IEEE has always been a priority for me. I needed to maintain that consistency with my IEEE. I look at it as a second career or second dedicated effort that I want to maintain. So I needed to have that consistency with IEEE in my efforts there. So I looked for other positions in my professional life, right? So you'll see my personal goals, right? Those are just a few. I had many over the years. So I write down my personal goals with my career, and just as I write down my personal goals with IEEE. So what are your personal goals, right? So here's some examples. You might want to gain a new skill. You might want to become an expert. You might want to add some people to your network, but target like what types of people you want to add. You might want to present at a conference. And this is what I tell young professionals, is to add this to your goal, your personal goal. I did this early on, that I wanted to write a paper annually, that I wanted to publish at a conference annually. But, set up some goals for yourself and align them with IEEE. One thing you'll see on the right are these things called SMART goals. And it's a really good practice to get into, is to write your goals so that they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So that you don't just write a goal that's ambiguous, but you write one so that you can, at the end of the year, you can know that if you've accomplished it or not. All right, so how did IEEE influence my career and my goals? So you'll see that for my technical growth, the standards work for software engineering. So I sort of grew up with software engineering, and I don't know if I was an influencer or not. What I did is they did remove the guides. So I worked with John Wiley and IEEE SA and the Computer Society, and I wrote some books with John Walls and some other people and replaced the guides. So, and applied them so that they align with some other methodologies like Agile, the CMMI, and Lean Six Sigma, and things like that. So that people, because those other process methodologies were also coming up and were important to practitioners during that time. So software engineering, computer science, standards, all of those helped me immensely in my technical growth. Soft skills, communication and teamwork. I would not be the manager I am today. I would not be, I don't know if people call me a leader or not, but I would not be able to go weekly. I have to go in front of senior leaders, 2 stars, colonels on a daily basis, and present. I have to develop briefings I have an hour's notice. I have to put a briefing together for a senior leader. I would not be able to do that if I had not had IEEE in my life. And then networking and relationship development. As I mentioned previously, I have relationships that I know who to reach out to if I need a question answered. I can reach out. I have a whole network of people I can reach out to across the world. So, and I can definitely say that I was empowered and emboldened by the technical clout and peer network provided by IEEE. And this was early on, that I can remember in my 30s saying I knew that I was right because I had the backing and the technical correctness provided by IEEE and the right answer. So, I show this chart quite often, that this is the view that our members often see when they come into IEEE. They might come in through membership. They might come, through MGA. They might come in through technical activities, a society or council, or the Standards Association, the way I did initially, humanitarian activities. But the one thing that we need to remember is that it doesn't matter where people come in from. It's that they all have a different need that they're trying to fill, right? And we need to make sure that people understand that there is a role for them in IEEE, and that they don't have to be stuck in a certain area. Like, I moved all around. I've served in MGA. I'm in my local section and in Region 3. I've served in technical activities. I'm working in educational activities. I've served in conferences. But we need to remember that there are opportunities to give back. There are networking opportunities. You, as a young professional, need to understand that IEEE is a very large organization, and that if you're not finding fulfillment in one area, that there are other areas that you can serve in. It's a big organization. So I wanted to mention the VOLT program. This is another way to jumpstart your IEEE career path if you're interested in MGA leadership. So you can go to the IEEE website and search for VOLT to find out more about this leadership training. If you need a recommendation to get in the VOLT program, email me and I will provide you a recommendation. So technical activities, as I said, I was very involved in the Computer Society. I'm also involved in Technical Engineering Management Society, and I'm in a number of councils. So you can go to these, you can look and see. Many of these cost very little money to join. I will say the Computer Society is the most expensive, but I will say you get what you pay for. Computer Society offers a lot of opportunity, as you could tell by my participation, for personal growth and participation. But councils don't cost anything to join. So you can join all of the councils for free. And there's lots of opportunity there for participation and leadership growth. So here's some other things that you can think about. Join young professionals. There's no cost to join young professionals. You can join women in engineering. You can participate in one of the conferences. You can participate in a standards working group. There is no cost to participate in standards working group. If you want to ballot on the standard that you've been working on, it costs money. You have to join standards. I was a volunteer for IEEE for 3 years, working in standards before I joined IEEE. That's how they got me, is that I worked on the standard, and when I wanted to ballot the standard, that's when I joined IEEE, and I've been a member ever since. You can work in site in humanitarian activities, but there's a whole bunch of opportunities, as I mentioned previously. Now, if you want to talk to someone about their volunteer experience, you can look in the member directory in Collaboratech, or you can join one of the Collaboratech groups and see and follow the discussion groups in Collaboratech to see what's going on. So my years of membership in IEEE have reinforced for me the relevance and importance of professional associations, not just IEEE. You know, there's a significance in being part of a group of people with a shared purpose that goes beyond one's own personal interest and career. So I will tell each of you listening that no matter how much effort I put into my volunteer activities, and there are many hours, many hours of volunteer activities that I dedicate to IEEE, that I get tenfold reward back. But if you want to be involved and engaged with IEEE, you have to put forward some effort. Yeah?
Ma'am, due to some time limitations, and we have our next session of our next speaker starting in just 2 minutes. So we will have to conclude our session in 2 minutes after we hand over to you a memento as a token of gratitude by our team. And we also have to inform the participants about the feedback form. So we are really sorry for the inconvenience. And to the viewers, for any queries you have, any questions you have, you can always contact Susan ma'am through IEEE or her LinkedIn profile given in the description. Over to you, Vrushti.
We request the participants to fill in the feedback form given in the description. Well, on behalf of IEEE ADIT Student Branch, I would like to thank Susan ma'am and request our team to provide a virtual memento to ma'am.
Thank you.
Yours was a truly remarkable journey, and I'm sure our audience will learn a lot from your experiences. Thank you, ma'am. Sorry again for the inconvenience, as we have to start our next session in a minute. So we'll take your leave, and viewers, stay tuned. We will be back in just a minute with the last but not the least speaker of the day. Thank you all.
Also, don't
Have a
forget to
great
like,
day.
share, and subscribe to our channel. We'll be back shortly. Thank you, ma'am.